Coming up, Tennessee's getting a new football coach, and the playoff conversation's getting a new contender, and its name is Auburn. It's all on the way next here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to AT&T's SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. We're glad to have you with us for a busy hour of SEC talk. About 15 minutes from right now, we'll say hello to Mark Burnett, who covers the Alabama Crimson Tide for SECCountry.com. We'll talk about a big come-from-behind victory for the Tide against Mississippi State. But before we begin, can you do me one huge favor?
Sure.
There's a lot of stuff we could talk about. Can we talk about Tennessee coaching search, Florida coaching search, Alabama's win? Can we do anything but talk about how bad Georgia looked on Saturday night? Because for those of you who watch every day, you know that's not a very pleasant conversation for me. Can we do anything but that today, please?
I thought for a minute, listen, when I was watching the Alabama-Mississippi State game, I almost texted you and said, man, we're both going to have to start the show with paper bags on our heads. I was like, we're both gonna have the big losses this weekend, but Bama able to pull it out, Georgia just not able to.
Some of the ladies in the audience would probably prefer if I did wear a paper bag on my head to do the show, but nonetheless, this is the face you have to look at, and yes, we'll talk a lot about Auburn and give them credit and try to figure out what's going on with Georgia. Before that, though, let me remind you, AT&T, proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. Before we get to any of that other stuff, let's start with the Tennessee coaching search. It's item number one on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Butch Jones is now out after a terrible loss for the Vols to Missouri. A lot of people wonder why John Currie, the Tennessee athletic director, waited as long as he did. We may never quite know the answer to that, but we do know now that Curry's ready to move on. In fact, he addressed the media over the weekend, and this is the way he let it be known that Butch Jones was not going to be in Knoxville anymore. Here's Curry.
This morning I met with Coach Butch Jones to discuss the future of the football program, and I informed him of my decision that he stepped down as the University of Tennessee's head football coach. Transitions like this are never easy for anyone involved, and I'm grateful for the way Coach Jones, Barb, Alex, Adam, and Andrew have poured their hearts and souls into this community. They're never easy improvement of our football program over the past 5 years. I know that Coach Jones will be successful as he moves forward in his career, and I know that Tennessee fans join me in thanking the entire Jones family for their service and dedication to this community and to the University of Tennessee.
So that is Tennessee coach Butch Jones right there weighing in. Or I should say it's John Currie right there, the Tennessee athletic director, weighing in on what the situation there. Butch Jones is out of the job. He's gone from Tennessee. And, I guess it leads to the question here of, kind of where this goes next. What's going to happen next here? Is this is this a John Gruden situation? Is this a different guy situation? I mean, what do these rumors kind of mean here?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Listen, John Currie, hey, welcome to the party. We knew this a month ago, what you decided to tell everybody yesterday, and I think it's a little bit too late. I think when you see the loss, that Missouri obviously put on Tennessee this weekend, 33 points, 659 yards of offense, man, put on Butch Jones and his Tennessee football defense. A little bit late, in my opinion. And now, the kind of everybody turns to John Gruden. Everybody turns to this coaching search. I'm kind of looking at the rest of the year for Tennessee and wondering where the win's going to come, wondering how you're going to get to 5 wins, as opposed to 4. LSU and Vanderbilt still left on the schedule. I don't know that it's John Gruden. I'm with you. It's kind of John Gruden against the field. Everybody's kind of cheering for that guy to be a part of the program. But you know what? Crazy things happen. I just don't think this one's in the works. I don't know if I'm John Gruden why I'm leaving the booth.
Justin DeMarco on the comment section says it can't be John Gruden. He hasn't coached in a decade. So I think there's a reasonable point to be made there if you're a Tennessee fan that maybe you don't want John Gruden.
Right.
There is this belief out there, and I know that some Tennessee fans like the idea of a big name, and the truth is I think all sports fans are sort of attracted to celebrity status a little bit. So, there is this belief that some Tennessee fans would like to be sort of rescued by the big name here, the former Super Bowl winning coach. But there's also what Justin kind of pointed out here of, why would Tennessee want to put its hopes into a guy that's never really recruited in a major way? He's been a grad assistant in college, but his coaching resume is mostly built in the NFL here. He's never recruited in a major way, and he's been out of coaching, for a decade here. I mean, there is a sense in which the celebrity status for Gruden is sort of bigger, I think, than the on-field impact would have been.
It definitely is. And listen, why don't we go out and get Tony Dungy? Why don't we, let's just fill this up with all these, celebrity status people. It's almost like saying Peyton Manning needs to be the next head coach. This is a guy, you talk about Peyton Manning, who's never been a college coach. John Gruden hasn't either. He's never been a college head coach. He's never had to recruit. He's on record as saying there's too many rules in college football. He would have teams on probation within 4 or 5 weeks if he had the job. I just think it's a little bit of a stretch. I would be happy for Tennessee fans if they got him. If the groomers were true, if this guy somehow turns out he wants to come to Knoxville, he wants to be a part of this program, but I don't see it as a home run hire at all. I think there's a lot of uphill battles you're going to face with John Gruden as a head coach. I think you need to look elsewhere if I'm John Curry.
Mark Philpott says Chris Peterson, University of Washington, built Boise State University into a powerhouse. Peterson is a very good coach,
yes.
but a guy like that, is he too connected to the Pacific Northwest? Is there a name out there that you say is the name for you that makes the most sense?
Well, I know Mike Leach has been floating around a lot lately. He's been linked to Ole Miss. He's been linked to a number of jobs. People kind of putting the feelers out. I don't know. To me, it's all about what direction does Tennessee want to go. Do they want to look at a Les Miles? They want to look. I look at a Bobby Petrino. I've said a couple times I think Bobby Petrino would be a good hire, but the Tennessee people probably wouldn't welcome him into Knoxville with his past.
Mickey Blassingame says throw Dan Mullen that Saban kind of money. Let's win again. I certainly believe that Dan Mullen is a top flight coach. He's developed quarterbacks here. Done a good job with Nick Fitzgerald. Did a great job with Dak Prescott before that. The recruiting job at Mississippi State's a lot different than it is at Tennessee.
Yeah, it is.
He's bringing a lot of junior college players in Starkville. It's a little different profile there at Tennessee. Mullen was asked about this today during his weekly press conference. I felt like his quote kind of sidestepped the question, at least the portion of the quote that I read. I mean, Mullen, I think, is a much better hire for Tennessee than John Gruden would be.
I definitely think so too, and I think it would be, honestly, I think it would be a home run hire for Tennessee. And I've been on the show and I've questioned Dan Mullen probably a little bit more than you have. And he showed me something this past weekend. Dan Mullen, that was one of the best coaching jobs I've seen him have at Mississippi State. I've always questioned kind of the ups and downs, the South Alabamas that you're going to find, some of the other places that come in and play Tennessee very tough. I didn't love that about Dan Mullen. Or I'm sorry, Mississippi State. I didn't love that about Dan Mullen. But if he gets to Tennessee, has a little bit higher of a recruiting, more fertile recruiting ground, and is able to get players into Tennessee and run his offense and run his defense, I think the sky a lot of times is going to be the limit for what he's able to do. I think he's a very good coach, very good situational head coach, and he has shown the ability to get programs to the next level. Can somebody else do that at Tennessee? I think that's the biggest question about Dan Mullen.
Yeah, I think so too. And in the comment section, Jeremy Pettis says that Dan Mullen's lost in Alabama 10 years in a row. Obviously, you want a coach there that can win against Alabama. That's one of Tennessee's biggest rivals. But the talent level he ought to be working with at Knoxville is much higher than the talent level would be in Starkville.
Yeah. It definitely should be. And I think that's all about building Tennessee back up to where it should be. Because you and I both said before the year started, listen, it's not about being down on Tennessee. It's not really about trolling Tennessee fans or anything like that when we call for Butch Jones' job. It's about what we remember out of Tennessee. It's about the Tennessee of yesteryear, being the Tennessee you were in the late 90s, being the Tennessee you were under Phil Fulmer. That's the Tennessee you and I both remember. That's where they need to get if they're going to continue to recruit at a higher level than they have been in the years past.
We'll be moving on to number 2 on our AT&T SEC Country Line First and 10 list. The bad for Tennessee includes looking for a new coach, but the biggest and best story in the SEC right now maybe belong to the Auburn Tigers, who throttled Georgia, a game that I attended at Jordan-Hare Stadium on Saturday. And, well, as you might imagine, after the game, Auburn coach Gus Malzahn felt very good about a lot of the things he saw, both from the fans in the stands, offensively and defensively. This was thorough domination from Auburn, and Malzahn reflected on it.
Extremely proud of our team. It was a huge win for us. They seized the moment. We talked about this being a great opportunity for us, and our guys seized the moment on the field. I'm very proud of our fans. I mean, our fans were off the charts the whole game and really helped us win this football game. Going into the game that we felt like we had to do to win is stop the run. And we did that. I think they had 46 yards rushing. Hats off to our defense against one of the better rushing teams in college football. And then we talked about we had to run the football, and we felt like we had to run for 200 yards plus, and we ran for 237.
Yeah, so obviously they did run the football, and they stopped Georgia's run, and that may be the most surprising thing of all. I mean, you know that Kerryon Johnson's a good running back. He may have actually been a little bit better than I anticipated him being, I'll admit that. But Auburn running the football and getting yards and points, not that big of a surprise. For me, the most significant surprise in the game was the fact that Auburn's defensive line completely neutralized the Georgia rushing attack. You had 3 different backs for Georgia coming into the game averaging more than 7 yards a carry. Nick Chubb actually averaged more yards per carry than Kerryon Johnson as well. To really get 4 Georgia backs, those kinds of stats above Kerryon Johnson, and yet the Auburn defensive front just could not be blocked on Saturday.
I think the first 20 to 25 minutes of this game were kind of what I expected to see. I think when you look at the first drive that Georgia was able to put together, kind of march right down the field, slice and dice, Chubb here, you're kind of throwing a little bit with Jake Fromm, you get right in the end zone. Auburn answers back with a few field goals. All of a sudden it's 9-7. That was the game I expected to see. The Georgia defense kind of rise to the occasion, makes some play, all these good athletes on the field. Then Jarrett Stidham hits the long pass. Then they score the touchdown. And then all of a sudden you go into halftime and you think, man, Auburn, it really does look a lot better right now. And then things just completely unravel in the second half. You know, McCole Hardman drops the punt. Penalties start to mount up. Things start to go the wrong direction. It was as shocking as a win as I've seen this year. And listen, I got to give Gus Malzahn credit. I've been on Gus Malzahn all year about the fact that he hasn't been able to really pull away in some of the big time scenarios. I think I know he's been to a national championship game, but to me, that was the biggest win of his coaching tenure, being able to beat the #1 team in the country by 23 points.
Yeah, biggest regular season win.
Yes.
And as you said, even though they're an SEC champion in 2013, beating that Missouri team on a neutral field is nothing like really throttling Georgia the way that they did. And if Zachary Mint in the comment section, Auburn fan, says, hey, a lot of people doubted us, now maybe they believe, and I think they probably do. And listen, I mean, I do think Auburn proved a lot. And you can point to some Georgia miscues. Georgia more penalties than it normally has. You have the drop punt by McCole Hardman there in the third quarter, which you referenced. There was a really curious decision by Kirby Smart at the end of the half, which Smart criticized himself for. But all that to me is secondary here. The real issue in this game on Saturday was the physical dominance that Auburn showed on both lines of scrimmage. I think that Auburn leaves that game on Saturday a legitimate national championship contender, a real threat to win the Iron Bowl against Alabama, a threat to even do more than that. In an SEC championship game rematch against Georgia, I think that'd be an interesting matchup. And then against anybody in the country. There is nobody in the country that I would obviously say that's a team that Auburn cannot beat. They lost by a touchdown on the field of the defending national champion. There's not a single team in the country when I look at them and say, Auburn could not beat that team. Now, they're not, they've got 2 losses here. Let's not pretend that they're, an invincible team, but they could beat anybody. That's what the game on Saturday, I think, proved.
Well, right, and, we're going to sit there and talk about, hey, people questioned Auburn, thought they couldn't get it done. Well, listen, the Gus Malzahn's the reason people question Auburn. I mean, 11 sacks against Clemson, couldn't make the adjustments, couldn't hold a 20-point lead against LSU. That still leaves me scratching my head now when I see what they are capable of against a Georgia football team. Why did you lose those other 2 games? But I think that's not what the focus should be today. The focus is on Gus Malzahn, this football team, the fact that they're able to rack up 488 yards of offense. Jarrett Stidham looked great. Kerryon Johnson looked great. Their defense looked incredible, especially in that front four, being able to rush the passer a lot of times against Jake Fromm. And they put a game plan together. For better or worse, Kevin Steele, Gus Malzahn, Chip Lindsey, whatever you're getting out of that head coach, coordinator combo, they put a game plan together that was able to dominate Georgia in that second half of that game.
Clint Cunningham says, didn't Auburn lose to LSU in a down Clemson team? Well, it's a down Clemson team in the fact that it doesn't have Deshaun Watson anymore, but the LSU game is a fair thing to bring up. And I still think that second half for Auburn against LSU is probably the most inexplicable thing that's happened thus far in the SEC this season. Virtually everything makes sense this year other than that for Auburn, who spent 30 minutes nursing a lead, not able to hold on to that against LSU. Now, Auburn's playing well enough now that we may not have to go back in the past and wonder what happened against LSU, but it is certainly fair to bring up how in the world did that LSU team beat this Auburn team, because I think in a side-by-side comparison, Auburn's clearly better, except LSU obviously was able to get the best of the other Tigers in that game there.
Well, I think there's also something to the fact that a lot of these teams get better as we go down the stretch. I don't think that, and I still don't think the Auburn offensive line situation has exactly sorted itself out, but whatever combo they were putting on the field Saturday seemed to work against Georgia. Schematically, what they were doing seemed to work against Georgia. I think that's been a lot of their issue this year is who's going to play where. Where's Austin Golson going to play? Prince Tega. I mean, where are you going to put all these pieces? But, man, they were dominant up front. I saw, Braden Smith a couple of times really move Trenton Thompson out of the hole. They looked great. They looked like world beaters. And I'm with you. I don't know, when you match up Auburn right now and you put them on the national title scene and move into the playoffs, they're hotter and playing as well as any team in the country. I think Oklahoma's really good right now. Miami obviously took a step, but I would put Auburn right next to both of those teams.
We're about 1 minute away from talking to Mark Burnett here. We'll talk to him about the Alabama win against Mississippi State, but obviously with the Auburn theme here, we'll also kind of talk about how this Iron Bowl matchup may have changed given the fact that Auburn looks as good as it does against Georgia. By the way, in Jordan-Hare Stadium, the same place Alabama has to come in a couple of weeks. So we'll talk to Mark Burnett about that coming up in just a minute, literally about 60 seconds from right now. Tyler Mann also in the comment section says, BA, it wasn't just the second half against LSU. It was actually from the second quarter on, which kind of goes back to something you've talked about a lot, that offensive philosophy for Gus Malzahn of just being too conservative in big moments. With the lead against LSU, probably an example of that, but not really doing that on Saturday, really kind of keeping his foot to the gas. Maybe a little bit at the end of the first half when he almost gave Georgia a chance for some points, but for the most part, this was not only a more aggressive Auburn and a really hungry fan base, it was probably a more aggressive Gus Malzahn, or you probably have to give the credit here to Chip Lindsey. Yes. It was just a more aggressive game plan all the way around. down.
Yeah, you saw some of the interesting things, the wrinkles that you expect from Gus Malzahn. You know, some of the throwback passes, the screen pass backside to Kerryon Johnson that was a beautiful play design. You know, the throwback passes, some of the things you've grown to know from Gus Malzahn, he really did bust out in this game. And I do think it's intriguing when you compare the LSU second half for Auburn against the second half for Georgia. I think it does kind of show a light at the end of the tunnel as far as Auburn's concerned.
David Williams in the comments section asked about the chance of Kerryon Johnson winning the Heisman Trophy. We're actually going to talk about that a little bit later on in our program. Right now, though, let's get ready to transition and check in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Welcoming a guy that covers the Alabama Crimson Tide. They had a thrilling win on Saturday against Mississippi State. But Mark Burnett, who joins us now, Mark, if you don't mind, let me pick up to begin with where we just finished a moment ago on the Auburn win over Georgia. I thought it was a dominant performance for the Tigers. I was obviously in the stadium for the game. And how much do you think Auburn looking good there changes the tone and the tenor around the Iron Bowl here in a couple of weeks? All of a sudden, is this the kind of game where maybe Auburn is given more of a chance of pulling the upset, given the fact that the stadium was hot and the atmosphere was intense and Auburn was looking good? I mean, how does that change the Iron Bowl here a little bit?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just the fact that, there's so much to play for. I mean, whoever wins this game is going to go to Atlanta and face Georgia for the SEC championship game and a right to probably go to the college football playoff. So I think, that's what's going to hype it up more than anything about how Auburn looked on Saturday. I just think this game is, over the years has been such a big game in terms of deciding the SEC West, and Auburn going to the national championship in 2013, in 2010, Alabama having their run of national championships. So this game has just been really huge, and it's kind of crazy to think that two programs in the same state have been this good nationally.
Mark, let's go back to this past weekend for a little bit. Obviously, a lot of the talking point and in Tuscaloosa today is going to be that game this past weekend in Starkville. I thought Alabama defensively looked as susceptible, to a Mississippi State offense that I've seen them look in some time. Obviously, a lot of that starting at the linebacking core. What kind of adjustments do you think is in store for them this week, moving into that Iron Bowl week next week?
Yeah, I think Alabama is going to have to make a decision this week on whether or not they're going to stick with Keith Holcomb next to Rashaan Evans in that nickel package, or if they're going to just get freshman Dylan Moses up to speed and, it's just sort of go with that. Because the situation is, you have to look at this. Keith Holcomb went from being a backup in nickel and money to being the starter at those positions, and you had Dylan Moses going from being basically an outside pass rusher to now being asked to do more than he probably was comfortable with. So I think these next 2 weeks are going to be really important to see what Alabama does. But I think even bigger than the linebackers was looking at the defensive line. They didn't get a ton of push throughout the game, and I thought that really sort of set the linebackers back. But I think it's going to be a situation where everybody's going to have to sort of look in the mirror and and figure out how they can clean this thing up, because the last thing you want to do is lose the Iron Bowl and have your season ruined.
Hey, Mark, I want to finish up with this. We're going to hear some audio in just a moment of Jalen Hurd talking about the speech that he gave at halftime of the game against Mississippi State. He obviously throws the game-winning touchdown pass. How big is a come-from-behind win for Hurts' legacy? I mean, how much does that add to the love that he's already getting from Tide fans and just the reputation that he's building for himself around college football?
Well, first, I just want to know if he's done enough to get a little bit of praise from you, B.A. Yeah, I think Jalen Hurts' legacy continues. I think Jalen Hurts' legacy continues to grow. I mean, I think this entire team is behind him. The majority of the fan base is behind him. I mean, everything the kid does, he just goes out there and wins. Whether you like it, whether it looks pretty or not, the only thing that matters at the end of the day is he's 22-1 or 23-1 as a starting quarterback, and he's got Alabama in really good position to make another deep playoff run.
Hey, Mark, we appreciate your time here today on AT&T SEC Country Live. Always love your coverage of the Tide, and yeah, we'll talk a lot about Hurts, and a lot of these Alabama fans are going to give me grief for it. Thanks for getting that ball rolling, by the way. We'll talk to you soon. Good stuff there.
Right, Mark,
good stuff there for Mark Burnett, who covers the Alabama Crimson Tide for SECCountry.com. Let me remind you real quick, by the way, that my name is Brandon Adams. This is Mike Johnson's AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless Direct TV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. Let's move on here. Look at item number 3 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And you generally sort of get a sense of how the show's going to go today. We're going to talk a lot about some coaching surges, a lot about some big wins. We'll kind of toggle between the teams that are feeling like they can win a national championship and the teams who are hopeful to do that in the years ahead with a new coach. One of those is Florida. And I thought that Pete Thamel from Yahoo Sports had kind of an interesting blurb in a recent piece there at yahoo.com about the fact that Florida's coaching search now includes vetting, apparently, former Oregon coach Chip Kelly. Here's what Thamel writes. We wrote the day after the firing that the 3 prime candidates for that position would be UCF Scott Frost, Chip Kelly, and Mississippi State's Dan Mullen. The trio still remains in focus, with sources indicating that a thorough vetting of Kelly has begun. That includes calls to NFL executives to do general background on Kelly and exploration of his NCAA issues at Oregon. Once again, that's Pete Thamel from Yahoo Sports. Do you believe that Chip Kelly is a legitimate candidate at Florida?
I think he should be. And listen, I've gone back and forth on this, and we've talked about this on the show a couple of times. Is Chip Kelly the guy to get it done at Florida? Can he recruit at that level? Do you need a guy like Chip Kelly at Florida when he's a guy who's done a lot with less talent, and all of a sudden you're going to have a ton of talent at Florida? They're always going to have talent at Florida. I'm kind of on the Kelly to Florida bandwagon right now, though. I see what he's done. And listen, I go back to that Auburn game he played in 2010, the way Auburn's defense was able to dominate Oregon up front and really make that game a moot point with Oregon's offense a lot of the time. But I also saw what he did defensively that year against Cam Newton and company. And I think that if he gets the right D coordinator down there, he could be an extremely dangerous guy. I think that I have a tendency to look at that game and say, well, Auburn's defense dominated Oregon that day, so maybe his style wouldn't work in the SEC. First of all, this isn't the SEC from 2010. You're not going to see those defenses week in and week out. Second of all, football as a whole has changed. So if you're talking about 8 years later, there's a lot more of these spread offenses being run than there was back in 2010. And I think that if Florida's going to go out and try to hire a big name and they can get Kelly right now, because Kelly's a guy that doesn't have a job. Those other 2 guys have jobs. Kelly doesn't have a job right now. If you can get him on board right now and start get that ball rolling on that early signing period and that December 20th signing day, he could be very, very dangerous in the years to come.
Let me hit a couple comments in the comment section. James Crump says Kelly will not be successful at Florida. A Georgia fan says, so in saying that, I hope that Florida hires Kelly. That's what James Crump, a Georgia fan, says. Quasi McDowell says, why is no one talking about Charlie Strong? I think the way it ends for Strong at Texas probably precludes him from getting the Florida job, even though he obviously has ties there. But let me go back to the Chip Kelly thing for a moment. You kind of make the case that you think that Kelly could be a successful coach for Florida. For me, though, the issue with what Pete Thamel writes here is, I don't know who his sources are on this, but I'm going to make a guess. I think the source for the Kelly rumor, and Thamel's not the only reporter to kind of say something like this about Kelly here over the last 24 hours. I think the sources for this are coming from Florida. What this reeks to me as, Florida trying to get somebody else off the waiting game here. Get somebody else's agent off the waiting game of, hey, let me, whether it's Scott Frost waiting to hear from Nebraska, whether it's Dan Mullen waiting to decide if he wants to take the Tennessee job or stay at Mississippi State, whatever waiting game's going on here, and maybe it's not Mullen or Frost, maybe it's somebody else. But this strikes me as a move by Florida to hurry someone else along to get the coach they really want. I don't believe that Chip Kelly's the coach that Florida really wants. I don't care about the show cause stuff with the NCAA. Yeah. That's an easy thing to navigate. That's not a big deal. That's a formality if Florida wants to do it. But I'm not so sure that the Chip Kelly style, not just style on the field, personality here as well. I'm not sure that's a fit for Florida. I'm not sure it's a fit for the SEC. Because as much as Urban Meyer brought a brand new offense to the league when he came here from Utah in, before the 2005 season, the truth is he was still a very SEC-style personality. He was a hard-nosed, tough recruiter, insatiable appetite for success and competition. That fits the SEC. Talk to people who've worked with Chip Kelly. They're going to tell you, Kelly's a little bit of a weird guy. He's not a great personality fit. A lot of people who worked with him at both the 49ers and the Eagles will tell you he was a weird guy. And I don't know that Florida needs another weird coach after they just fired a weird coach. Y'all think I'm joking, but it's true. McElwain was a weird guy. Anybody connected to the Florida program will tell you that. He never fit in there. It'd be very tough to go to another coach who's also maybe likely not to fit in. I believe the Chip Kelly stuff is coming from Florida, and I believe it's all smoke and mirrors to get the coach they really want.
Well, listen, and I think there is something to that, because I think that all the reports out of Florida right now are that Scott Strickland is really fed up with what Jimmy Sexton is doing.
Yeah.
Jimmy Sexton is Jim McElwain's agent. He's Dan Mullen's agent. He's the agent for Nick Saban. He's got numerous clients. So I am hearing a lot that Scott Strickland is fed up with what Jimmy Sexton's trying to do. So maybe it is kind of an agent game. But my thing when I look at Chip Kelly, what has Florida been clamoring for since Urban Meyer left? Somebody that just looks like they know how to run an offense. It doesn't always have to look pretty. It doesn't mean you're going to beat everybody. But Chip Kelly can run an offense. Now, will his style of offensive line play, 285-pound linemen that have to run 90, 100 snaps, will that work? I think there's a better chance that it works now than it did 10 years ago when he was at Oregon. I think that's something we're going to have to figure out, and Florida fans will have to figure out before they get hired. But I look at what's out there, and you've mentioned this before. There's not just, these guys aren't just growing on trees. I look at what else is out there. I'm obviously on the bandwagon of Matt Campbell. I think he'd be a great hire at Florida.
Yeah.
But if they get Chip Kelly, and it's like I said, the biggest thing about that to me is that they can hit the ground running recruiting right now if they hire Chip Kelly this week, and reportedly that's what might happen. I think it's a good hire for them.
Chris Smith says Scott Frost would build a dynasty at Florida. Now, Frost is a guy that's kind of from that Chip Kelly coaching tree, given the fact that he learned from him, and it's kind of a weird thing to say, but I don't think Frost is a home run hire for Florida either, but I think Frost would almost be a better hire than Chip Kelly because, I mean, you know, this is a guy who may just be a little less weird. I mean, I can't help keep going back to that. You know, Chip Kelly is a personality that not everyone got along with. And listen, the SEC is a backslapping league. You gotta give speeches to donors. You gotta be face to face with the recruits. You know, you can't hide behind a Nike logo at Florida the way that you can at Oregon. You gotta be the face of a program. Is that fat, rosy face for Chip Kelly ready to be the face of the Florida Gators program? I don't know that it is.
That fat, rosy face for Chip Kelly.
Seriously, you see him on TV, does he look and sound like a Florida coach?
I know that Chip Kelly would love to get back in the NFL, but I got bad news for Chip Kelly. I think that door's kind of closed. I think you've worn out your welcome, but what you were good at is coaching in college. And so I think he does need to look at himself in the mirror a little bit. We talked about guys looking at himself in the mirror. He needs to look himself in the mirror a little bit and say, you know what am I good at? And maybe I do need to get back on recruiting. Maybe this is the way to get back on top as a head coach. He's not a guy that I don't think is going to take a coordinator role. He's not going to move into one of these things where he doesn't have to recruit as much, and he's not going to get back in the NFL. I think that he takes a job at Florida and maybe has to look himself in the mirror a little bit and understand, hey, Florida is a place where I can recruit, don't have to go that far, can get the speed, can get the athletes I need. I'm back on the side of thinking that's a good hire now.
Michael Moss says that Chip Kelly's not the weird guy. I'm the weird guy. Maybe I am. But did you just say you think Chip Kelly would be a good hire for Florida?
I do. Listen, here's my problem with Scott Frost, too. And like I said, Matt Campbell, I've thrown out a ton of names. Scott Frost, at some point, I don't know that they get him early enough in this cycle to make it meaningful. I think that he's going to listen to Nebraska when that job comes open. Obviously, he's a guy that played for Nebraska, and that could be something that kind of hints that relationship.
And by the way, Tyler Mann, some of y'all are still making fun of Jim McElwain's teeth. The guy's out of a job. Can we leave McElwain's teeth alone after all this time?
That guy's got plenty of money from that buyout to be able to go fix those teeth. So
maybe he will because the people. Tyler, that's not very nice. People in our comment section still give him a hard time over those teeth. All right, let's move on to item number 4 in our AT&T SEC Country Life First and 10 list. So we had Mark Burnett on a minute ago. We talked about the Alabama come-from-behind win against Mississippi State on Saturday and the role that Alabama quarterback Jalen Hurd played in that, throwing the touchdown pass to Devontae Smith that sealed the deal and gave the Tide the lead there with less than a minute to go. But after the game, when ESPN reporter caught up with Hurd on the field, Hurd wanted to let him know that it wasn't just a touchdown pass that he threw, but it's also what he said to his team during the halftime speech. Here is Jalen Hurd explaining the role that he thought he played in the Alabama victory on Saturday night.
What was the call there at the end on the slant route to Devonta Smith?
Well, I saw cover 0, blitz, and I gave him a slant route. He made the play. I mean, but going back to your other question, went into halftime, and I told him I was driving the bus, and the bus was pulling off, and they was going to either get on or get off, and they got on, and we got it done tonight.
Jalen Hurd says he's driving the bus. You either get on, you get off. And he got on the bus and took him to win at Starkville, Mississippi. So it's as simple as that. I mean, Mark Burnett's given me a hassle before. Jeremy Pettis in the comment section, he's giving me grief. I mean, is this the legend of Jalen Hurd born in this game on Saturday night?
It's not as simple as that. Can you do it in 2 weeks in the Iron Bowl when everything's on the line and you're not in Starkville, Mississippi dealing with cowbells? But I think it was a notch on his belt. I think we've got to give Jalen Hurd credit for what he was able to do. This is a guy who a lot of people didn't think could make this drive at the end of the game when it was needed, and he showed the ability to do that. Listen, I'm not in love with the product that Alabama's shown. I think they have a ton of issues right now in that defensive front seven that we have not seen under Nick Saban. When you look at time of possession, 39 minutes to 21 minutes, that is not Alabama style of football. Not only that, but Mississippi State was 8 of 15 on third down. 8 of 15 on third down. You just don't see that from Alabama defense, and I think that's very concerning when you look at what Auburn was able to do to Kirby Smart in Georgia's defense. They're going to try to do those same things to Alabama in 2 weeks.
So, listen, y'all are about to get so mad at me. I'm not doing this. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm not trying to stir up trouble.
Don't do it.
But you touched on the issue that matters most of all here. It's a great throw and catch from Hurts to Devontae Smith. I was watching it in Auburn. A real thrilling way to end that game. But legends are not born in Starkville, Mississippi. I mean, you said it a moment ago. That field in Starkville, Mississippi is not the place where legends are born. Yes, nice come-from-behind victory. Alabama's playing that game as a 2-touchdown favorite. It's a team that Georgia beat 31-3. It's a team that Auburn waxed as well, and Alabama's having to fight, scratch, and claw to win the game. This is not the kind of performance that gives Jalen Hurd the Heisman Trophy, given the nature of the opponent, the nature of the environment. That ought to be the kind of place that Alabama's getting an easy win, not a, oh my gosh, can we make a throw here to Devontae Smith that saves us. And to go back to what we saw in this program during the offseason, I am more sure than ever that Jalen Hurd cannot keep pace with Jarrett Stidham. I mean, I'm more sure about that than ever, that the offense that Stidham's running at Auburn right now is superior to the one that Jalen Hurd is leading at Alabama.
Well, and that's possible. But here's what we're going to go back to, and I think this is a good point to look at, because we both said this last week about Georgia's offense facing Auburn and what Jake Fromm would do. And if Georgia lost that game, that it wasn't going to be because of Jake Fromm. It was going to be because the running game didn't work, and because Nick Chubb couldn't get his yardage, and because you weren't able to do the things out wide. That, to me, is what this game's all about. Okay. If they had won this game or lost this game, it's not because of Jalen Hurd. Now, he does get a star on his helmet for throwing that touchdown pass at the last minute because a lot of people didn't think he could. But if they had lost this game, it's about Damian Harris not getting his yardage, and it's about the defensive front seven. So I know that we look at this and say maybe Jalen Hurd can't keep pace with what Jarrett Stidham does, but it's very similar to Georgia. That's just not Alabama's brand. They're not going to put it all on Jalen Hurd to keep up with Jarrett Stidham. They're going to depend on their front seven, depend on running the ball, and what Jalen Hurd does is just kind of an add-on.
Bo Molinari says instead of driving a bus, it's more like Jalen Hurd is pushing a lawnmower. I'll let you decide for yourself if that analogy rings true.
What's Bo? Is he a Texas A&M fan?
Yeah, he's an A&M fan.
About that coach's job security. I mean, can we worry about the lawnmower that is Kevin Sumlin right now?
But here's the thing. You got to understand this. What I've said about Jalen Hurd is not that he's not a good quarterback. What I've said is he's the quarterback that'll keep Alabama from winning a national championship. So at a certain point in time, he is going to have the spotlight on him because in a comparison to a Jarrett Stidham, I just think Stidham's a better player. In a comparison to a Baker Mayfield, I think Mayfield's a better player. In a comparison to a J.T. Barrett, if you're to play Ohio State in a postseason game, I think Barrett's a better player. My issue with Hurts is not how he compares to other quarterbacks in the SEC. My issue with Hurts is in a close game against an elite team, is he better than that other quarterback? And I still have those question marks, and maybe it's unfair, but Hurts is not going to be able to prove me wrong in Starkville, Mississippi, because that's not the proving ground where this kind of stuff is decided.
Well, and that's fine. I think my only point, just looking ahead to the Iron Bowl, is they're not going to win the Iron Bowl because of Jalen Hurts, and they're not going to lose it because of Jalen Hurts. He's not going to throw a bunch of interceptions, and that's kind of what you have to look at, and that's kind of what the drum has been beating all year from Alabama fans, is that this guy doesn't turn the ball over, and it's all about that running game and what he can do with his legs. I think Auburn's going to have to attack him differently than they did at Jake Fromm. I think that you can load up and load the box. You can force Jake Fromm to throw the ball, and he didn't look great throwing it. And Nick Chubb, what did he get? 37 yards rushing. I think it looks different when you're defending a Jalen Hurts. And maybe he's not the guy with the arm in the pocket that Jarrett Stidham is, but his legs are the great equalizer. And that will force Kevin Steele and company to try to defend him differently. And I think that's why you still love a guy like Jalen Hurts if you're an Alabama fan.
HB Marie says, I don't know if there's room on the bus because his ego is so big. I don't want to make a big deal about this, but I mean, it is kind of interesting that he wanted to make sure it was known that he gave the speech at halftime. That's an interesting thing for a quarterback to say.
It is interesting. I mean, for a 19-year-old kid, I guess that he's tired of getting questioned too. And I don't love it. I'm kind of with you. Listen, let's let somebody else tell that story instead of you telling the story. That was kind of always my forte when I was at Alabama. Let somebody else tell the story. You don't have to tell the story, but. Listen, if his team's behind him and if the offense believes in him, then more power to him. Let him drive that bus and let him try to keep going on it for a couple more weeks.
Traw Dukes is mad at me, too. Even some Georgia fans are mad about this when it comes to Jalen Hurts. But, look, you say that's not the reason they'll win or lose the Iron Bowl game. But what if Auburn's got a lead? All of a sudden, the game is thrust more into Jalen Hurts' hands at that point in time. Auburn is the kind of team that can score and then score quick. And I'm not telling you they're going to run all over Alabama, but they could score in bunches early, which does make Hurts a bigger factor. Because I agree with you. For the most part, Alabama is like Georgia, wants to run the football. It wants to utilize the power running game. But that is somewhat neutralized if you're facing a deficit, especially if you're facing that late, which at that point in time does put the ball in the hands of Hurts to match the big scores and the big throws that Jarrett Stidham's making.
Well, listen, and here's what I'll say about that. If Auburn scored 40 points on Alabama in a couple of weeks like they did against Georgia, then you didn't have a good chance of winning the game anyways. Alabama's not a team that should be giving up 40 points on defense. That's not how their blueprint is. You don't give up that amount of points and expect, hey, we're going to expect 45 points out of Jalen Hurts. He's going to play keep away. He's going to be able to do some things with his legs. But I kind of go back to that Clemson game where his numbers weren't very good with his arm. He was 11 of 30 passing, but he did do the things on that final drive before Deshaun Watson got back on the field to put his team back in the lead. I'm not saying that Jalen Hurd, belongs in the Heisman talk. I'm not saying his numbers are great. What I'm saying is he is a good quarterback for this team right now, and he deserves credit for what he did against Mississippi State.
Steve Weaver says, I'm just saying this about Jalen Hurts to distract from the Georgia loss. Trust me, the Georgia loss is going to get its time here. Georgia's going to take its medicine. I'll be right there getting abuse from all these Auburn people all day long. So we'll do all that coming up. For now, though, let's move on to item number 5 on our AT&T SEC Country Life First and 10 list. So if things cannot get worse for Arkansas, it appears they have here, as Cole Kelly, the Arkansas quarterback, arrested over the weekend for suspicion of DUI. We have, I believe, a Twitter image here that captures the mugshot there from Cole Kelly. Brett Bielema, the Arkansas coach, does respond today by letting me know that he's suspended right now. He's not going to be with the team here, and I think that Bielema's pretty much fired no matter what. I don't know that this has any kind of extra impact on that, but this is one of those things that I think is a poor reflection on Brett Bielema, fairly or unfairly. I don't draw a line and say it's Brett Bielema's fault that Cole Kelly got arrested on suspicion of DUI, but it will be held against him. And if he was on the fence about do we fire him or not, this is one of those things that would probably sort of push him into the unemployment line direction. I think he's already lost his job, so it's probably a moot point. Yeah. But if he were on the fence, this may have gotten him canned. Yeah,
if he were on the fence, this is definitely a bad look. I think that when you look at the ship that Brett Bielema has been running, anytime you have a player like this arrested after a game, by the way, Cole Kelly played in this game. He was 3 of 10 for 36 yards, so maybe that's why he was out that late. But I think that, I'm with you. I think the ship has kind of sailed on Brett Bielema. Austin Allen didn't look great. And by the way, this was a close game at halftime. This was a 7-7 game. And I thought, man, Brett Bielema could pull this off, and they could look a lot better. And all of a sudden, Brett Bielema's record, all of a sudden he's sitting there at, what would he have been, 5-5 or something like that. And he looks a lot better. But they weren't able to do it. The second half adjustments that Ed Orgeron and company made absolutely exposed Arkansas in the second half. And when you add this on top of it, the problem after the game, 4 a.m., this kid's out drinking and driving on, with 2 wheels on the curb. I think it's a terrible look right now.
Let me ask you a question, and you're literally the only person in this room who can answer this. Of our audience, I'm assuming you're the only one that can answer this. Quarterbacks are supposed to be leaders, and Cole Kelly, had the look of potentially a leader for Arkansas. Yeah. If a guy's going out, let's say he's guilty of this. We don't know. I mean, let's just say he's guilty of this just for the sake of conversation. If he's going out and getting drunk and driving, then he's kind of a knucklehead who's not being a good leader off the field, I'm going to assume. Can you tell, if you're an Arkansas player, are you surprised to find out your quarterback's not making good decisions off the field? Or do the other players in various locker rooms kind of know whose head's screwed on straight and who's not? We're obviously surprised to hear this about Kelly. Do you think the Arkansas players are probably surprised?
I don't know any college football players that are going to, cast stones in a glass house. Like that's the nature of the beast in college football.
But it's one thing to get drunk; it's another thing to be drunk driving.
I agree. Listen, I totally agree. What I'm saying is that college kid makes they make dumb mistakes. So I think you have to be careful right now when your backup quarterback's out drinking and gets arrested, not to be like, hey, this kid's an idiot. He can never lead this football team. I think the players in that locker room will probably say, hey, Austin Allen's our guy. He's the guy that's going to have to lead this football team for the rest of the year. And next year is probably a reset button. You go into the offseason, maybe Cole Kelly becomes your guy. Maybe you do have a new head coach. Maybe, there's a lot of other things going on within the program. But I don't think this is a banishment of Cole Kelly. I think that his teammates will continue to respond to him at the helm if he continues to play good football. That's just how it is in college right now. And he has to move forward from it, learn from mistakes, not do anything like this again. But I honestly, I think when you look at kind of the future of this program, I think his teammates will end up forgiving him.
All right, item number 6 on our AT&T SEC Country Life First and 10 list. So, yeah. Listen, I'm going to be taking a lot of grief here all week long. Apparently, I talked a little trash on Twitter last week. Some Auburn fans found that out.
Was it the 37-point tweet?
I don't even know. Listen, who knows? I mean, come to find out, Twitter keeps a record of all this stuff. I guess the stuff that you tweet stays up there, I guess. Come to find out, that's true. I've been hearing it from Auburn fans ever since then. So, you know what? That's fine. Item number 6, Auburn does just clobber Georgia on Saturday. So much so that after the game, Gus Malzahn, the Auburn coach, feeling pretty proud of himself. If you want to know an idea of what people have been saying to me on Twitter, listen to what Gus Malzahn said. Now, our SEC country folks were able to kind of capture this. Malzahn not knowing that he's recorded, but nonetheless, this is what he said to anyone who was there to listen right after he finished his own interview on TV. Here's Auburn coach Gus Malzahn.
We whipped the dog crap out of this. crap out of him, didn't he?
We whipped the, I'll kind of clean it up a little bit, canine excrement out of Georgia there. Listen,
man.
I mean, Kirby Smart was asked about this today, and he said, hey, when you beat us as bad as Auburn did, I guess that's what you get to say. That's essentially what Kirby Smart said. I mean, is this all's fair when you go out and get the big W here? Malzahn certainly feeling pretty proud of himself.
Well, and let's take this in context. He didn't say this at the podium. He didn't say this in a post-game interview. He said this, kind of candidly. I don't know who he was talking to, but obviously when you get off there, you're going to say things like this, and it's not like it's not like you didn't expect to hear this from Auburn people. Maybe not a head coach, but I guarantee the players are all saying the same thing. I don't think it's that bad a look for Gus Malzahn. First of all, they did whoop Georgia, so I guess he deserves a little bit of a right to post. But this is something that's kind of, he's caught off guard. This is not a statement he's making to the public. Somebody, just happened to film him doing something like this. So I'm not going to bury the guy over it. I think he deserves a little bit of time to boast. He's coming off the biggest win of his career as the Auburn head coach, and somebody just caught him at a bad time.
Well, the reason why I'm okay with it is not because, he kind of got captured at a time when he didn't know he was being recorded. He's the SEC coach on the football field after the game. You should assume you're always being recorded. That's not that big of a deal to me. What makes it kind of okay for him to boast about it was the fact that it's so obviously true. I mean, as someone who sat there and watched it and was disappointed by what I saw, I mean, there is very little reason to criticize any of his assessment of the game. I mean, it was thorough on both sides of the ball, and you know what? I mean, coaches are not that much different than players when it comes to stuff like this. You lay your life on the line out there at practice every single week. You put your reputation on the line when you go out there and play. And had it gone the other way, Malzahn may have very well lost his job. So, I'm sure that he's got a little bitterness about some of the things that have been said about him. And to kind of go out there and see your team essentially spike the football the way that it did against Georgia, from that standpoint, I don't mind him saying it, but it is the kind of thing that Georgia is going to try to use against him. Now, I don't know if it's going to work because Georgia may not be good enough. But if these two teams were to play again in the SEC championship, you better believe. And you know this because of what Scott Cochran would do at Alabama. Georgia's version of Cochran, Scott Sinclair, that video clip is going to be looping all over the place. We looped it twice on this show. Georgia's going to loop it a whole lot more than that. They're going to play it over and over and over again. It's just a matter of is Georgia good enough to do anything about it.
Yeah, it is interesting to me that you bring up Scott Cochran because the first thing when I saw that video was I remember in 2008 when Scott Cochran said Georgia was going to a funeral. Somebody was filming over the gate at practice. While we're all stretching and Scott Cochran says, oh, they're wearing black because they're going to a funeral. Bad look. Looked terrible. It looked terrible on Alabama's part. A lot of questions were asked to Scott Cochran, but here's a guy who doesn't think he's being recorded. He's talking. He's trying to hype his team up. I don't know who Gus Malzahn was talking to. Different circumstances, but it almost sounded like relieved shock coming out of Gus Malzahn. Like, I'm kind of surprised we won that big. I'm really relieved that I'm not going to get fired tomorrow. And you know what? Hey, we're feeling really good right now. I just have to give him a pass. I think there was a lot of emotions coming out at that point in time.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And it's just kind of say where this goes. Logan Westman says, who's an Alabama fan, by the way, it was classist for Malzahn to say that, just like challenging the first down up 30 points. Yeah, listen, Malzahn was having a good time the other night, calling pass plays late in the game, challenging spots late in the game, talking about canine excrement after the game. I mean, Alabama fans, Georgia fans, they all noticed Malzahn was clearly feeling pretty good about himself.
We've been crushing the guy about his second half against LSU.
Well, you have. I haven't.
Well, I have.
I mean, actually, that I probably have.
20 points, 20-point comeback for an LSU team that had just lost to Troy. I'm going to question the guy, and so I don't mind him keeping his pedal to the. Listen, he knows his job's on the line. I'm throwing everything at this team right now. That's the number one team in the country that could easily come back, have a lot of firepower. I don't mind what he did.
All right, that's Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. This is AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV. They will help you stay connected all season long, including from a big weekend last week and looking ahead to a big weekend this weekend as well. And for more on that, let's do item number 7 here on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So this to me is kind of a weird thing. This is one of those moments where I sort of feel one way, but I kind of need you a little more level-headed, a little more even keel.
I don't know about
Tell me if I'm reading this the wrong way. We have a quote here from a Tennessee recruit from the Orlando Sentinel. I want to show it to you on the screen. It's Tanner Engel, a prospect who was a part of Tennessee's 2017 class or 2018 class. But this is what Engel told his hometown paper, the Orlando Sentinel. I spoke with Coach Jones about 30 minutes ago. This is right before it became official that Jones was going to be fired. He said he didn't really expect that to happen, meaning lose his job, but it did. So he told me, find a place to go quickly. And then he says, if he gets anything, meaning a new job for next year, he will contact me. But the thing that Tanner Engel says here that I find to be the most interesting is, is that Jones told him to go somewhere quickly. In other words, get out of your commitment to Tennessee and go find another place to play. Now, that strikes me as Jones recruiting against Tennessee. Not because he thinks he's going to coach next year and going to have Tanner Engel on his team, but because he's like, I'm not going to be at Tennessee anymore. You ought to go somewhere else.
Right.
Is it wrong for Butch Jones to, what I read right there, as recruit against Tennessee on his way out the door? What do you feel about that?
It's 100% wrong. And listen, I think the more shocking part of this is that he said he didn't expect this to happen. You read the first part.
Do you have the internet in Orlando?
How did I expect this to happen? And you're the guy coaching, and you didn't expect this to happen. I think it is. I think it's a bad look. Listen, obviously you're going to put your 2 cents on this, but when I read this, and I've kind of. We've questioned what Butch Jones was the last couple of weeks, haven't we? We've talked about his history, possibly fighting players, talk about lying to the media, kind of pushing the envelope on a couple different topics. Maybe Butch Jones isn't the guy that we kind of makes himself out to be in the media. We've talked about that the last couple of weeks. This is another notch in that direction. This is a terrible look for Tennessee right now. And I think they have to be happy right now, even more so, that they have Butch Jones heading out of town. I don't care what job he gets. It's not going to be getting Tanner Engel, on wherever he's going.
Max McDonald says that's a low blow for Butch. I agree with Max on that. And listen, here's the thing for me. We did talk about this last week. I think low key Butch Jones is kind of a bad guy. I do. Sometimes he's treated by the media as kind of a harmless buffoon, a harmless goofball. The truth is, I think he's a little bit of a bad guy, and I think this is an example of that, because some people might say, well, he's not being paid to recruit for Tennessee anymore. He's still getting paid by Tennessee, and all you got to do is not recruit against him at this point in time. Yeah, you may, if you want to be a nice guy and call up and say, hey, bad news. I lost my job. I'm not going to be at Tennessee anymore. I was looking forward to coaching you. Just wanted you to hear from me that I'm not going to be there to coach you. There's no problem. But to tell that player to go find somewhere else to go quickly, that to me feels like recruiting against a school that's going to have to write you an $8 million check. So Tennessee's now paying Jones $8 million to tell 4-star recruits from Florida to go somewhere else quickly and not stick with Tennessee? That doesn't sit right with me.
Well, listen, and I understand the point about, hey, he's not getting paid to recruit for Tennessee anymore. But guess what? If you're that next school in line, how good are you feeling about bringing Butch Jones on board to that school? If you're a school that's seeing this, do you really want to pay Butch Jones any more money with the possibility that he's going to leave and maybe take his players when he goes, or give him a job as a coordinator, and maybe he takes players elsewhere when he gets a head job again? I mean, I don't feel good if I'm any situation hiring Butch Jones right now. And by the way, I don't even know if this is a talking point, because I'm not sure when this guy ever gets a head coaching job again. When you look at what Missouri did to this guy and what the season has been like, and kind of some of the off-the-field stories, I don't know if he ever even has the problem of trying to sign recruits ever again.
Bo Molinari says this should affect his hireability. It's the kind of thing I would think about. I think Bo's kind of touching the same point that you were touching on, which is that, there's something about Butch Jones right now that you got to take a kind of a wait-and-see approach on. It's a lot like Jim McElwain. It's not that different. McElwain's got the death threat allegations. Were they true? Were they not? You believe them. Some people don't. But McElwain's a hard guy to hire for 2018. I think Butch Jones, in a very similar situation, although different circumstances, is a hard guy to hire in 2018. I don't know that he'll ever coach the Power 5 level again, and it may be a little while here, a little time out for him before he gets a chance to be a head coach once again.
Well, and listen, I think there's an extra layer to it. I think you can kind of compare the two, but Jim McElwain, I mean, if somebody questions, say, hey, did you really get death threats? Hey, there's probably a screen grab, there's probably a voicemail, there's probably something out there that points to evidence. I think that this being out there and this guy obviously clearly saying that Butch Jones told him to go elsewhere, that's a situation you can't really clear up if you're Butch Jones. Jim McElwain can kind of clear his situation up. That's not something Butch Jones can just sweep under the rug. So I didn't expect him to get a head coaching job. I think that maybe he gets an assistant job. But even so, if you're a head coach in the SEC or another Power 5 team and you're looking at assistant coaches and Butch Jones is out there, it's a terrible look for him. And I know that a lot of people have said that Ed Orgeron did this when Lane Kiffin was fired. And all this stuff kind of went around the block. I don't care what it is. It's a terrible look, and he will not be up for any job that I'm looking at.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm sure a lot of coaches say a lot of things privately when they don't think anyone's listening. It's more of the Butch Jones got caught doing this, and it's a bad look that you got caught. I'm sure there's a lot of listen, I've heard all kinds of stories about what some coaches have done on their way out of the door in certain places. Yes. I've certainly heard that. In this case, though, Butch Jones got caught doing this, and it sounds like you agree with me. It's a bad look to get caught for.
Well, it's definitely a bad look to get caught. And, we talked last week a little bit about Florida and how I was kind of impressed with the way they've been able to hold that recruiting class together. For the most part, they have been able to hold the recruiting class together at Florida. Everybody's kind of the wait-and-see mode. 4 decommitments. Evidently, Butch Jones was saying something to these guys on the phone to where they're not holding their class together right now. A lot of guys kind of falling off in the last couple of weeks.
Jeremy Pettis says Butch Jones should go coach Troy, so that way maybe LSU can beat them next year. Man, y'all kicking LSU when they're down. We're not even talking about LSU.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, Jeremy, come on.
I don't.
Come on. Can we let LSU get up off the mat here? They got the boot trophy. They beat Arkansas.
Listen.
Y'all are still kicking LSU when it's down.
LSU's
Making fun of Jim
being kicked.
McElwain's teeth, making fun of LSU for losing to Troy. I mean, some of y'all.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And Jeremy's team's undefeated, for goodness sake.
I don't even have anything to add on.
How about you be happy about your own team?
I don't
Let me
even
tell
have
you
any.
something. You think I wouldn't kill to be where you are right now? You still got an undefeated team to cheer for? And you're over here making fun of LSU. Some of y'all, man.
Hey, I'm telling you right now, I don't
Some
even.
of y'all.
I'm at a loss. You know, it's just. I guess you know what? It's the middle of November, man. It's the most beautiful time in college football. Everybody's still playing for something.
All right, let me move on here to item number 8 here on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So we've dealt with the Auburn win here a couple times. Let me deal for a moment with the Georgia loss. And I want you to hear this from Kirby Smart. Because I thought that Smart assessment of the way that Georgia really fell apart in this game, not just getting pushed around physically, but also penalties and miscues, the kinds of things that we haven't seen from Georgia all season long. He kind of reflected on something that I didn't expect him to say. Here's Kirby, and you tell me how much you agree with what he had to say.
I feel like that uncharacteristically, the out-of-bounds penalty, the halo penalty, the jumping over the shield, we never do that. We never jump over the shield. I mean, talk to the kids about that, and that's what's disappointing because it was out of character almost. You know, I'm in a hostile environment, and I resort to things that I don't normally do. That's the disappointing part, but that wasn't what won or lost the game. It was the line of scrimmage. It was their physicality. That won the game, but what made it so lopsided was the undisciplined penalties.
So you and I both agree that the last part's true.
Oh, yeah.
Georgia lost because it got shoved around on both sides of the ball.
Yes.
There's really no point in us saying that again because we both agree. But how about what he said about the penalties? Georgia had a lot. I believe it was 4 15-yard penalties in the first half. He talked about the miscue and the punt. That was the first punt reception of the third quarter after Georgia just gotten a 3-and-out. There were a lot of sort of moments where you're like, wow, that doesn't really feel like Georgia. And Kirby said what a lot of fans said. Y'all, the stadium on Saturday at Jordan-Hare was so dadgum loud. That thing was just beating down on Georgia's neck all day long. It sounds like Kirby sort of thought that atmosphere got to Georgia, and maybe some people might even say the moment, being number 1 on the road against a top 10 team also got to Georgia. I mean, how much are you putting into that? And is it the kind of thing that you think this season Georgia can bounce back from?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if they'll have to bounce back. I think that, their kind of fate's already sealed when you talk about getting the SEC title game. If they do get to match up with Auburn again or Alabama or whatever it is, it will be neutral site. And on down from there, if they're able to win that game, neutral site. And so I think that that's not something they're going to face again. But I think there is a lot to it, and we've talked about this a couple times on the show, what it means to be the number 1 team. Is it really any different? I know the field's still the same side. I know the game plan's still going to be the same, but sometimes you do try to play over your head. You try to do extra things you think gives your team an advantage and really just works against you. And listen, Bama got called for jumping over the halo as well, jumping the shield, and I thought it was a bad look. But I think it kind of pushes you to say, hey, these guys are on the road. Their backs against the wall. They're trying to do extra things. There's something to be said about a team that has been there before. When you have teams like Clemson or Alabama or some of these other teams that have been in the college football playoff and on a national stage, the teams that have been there usually fare well because they know those guys need to play within themselves. Georgia has all the ability in the world to bounce back. The path is clear for them to get wherever they want to go this season and still win whenever they want to win. They have to learn to play within their own game plan, though, if they're going to do it.
Patrick Hopp says Georgia got dominated and brought back to reality. I mean, is it as simple as that? Did this show that Georgia's not a true contender, not capable of winning the SEC championship? Or is it more about, hey, road games are just tough to win especially against a top 10 opponent with a lot to play for? I mean, how much was this Georgia being exposed, and how much of this was just, hey, a bad game for a team that hasn't had one all season long?
Well, I think Georgia definitely got exposed in some ways. I think that obviously anytime you can stop Nick Chubb and give him the numbers that you gave and give the ground game the numbers that Auburn gave them, there was a little bit of exposure. But I think that you got to give some credit to what Kevin Steele did on this defensive game plan. I think that X's and O's wise that he probably outcoached Jim Chaney a little bit. I think Gus Malzahn and Kirby Smart have been facing off for years now. So I think that you have to give. I think you have to give Gus a little credit too for putting some wrinkles in that kept Kirby's defense off balance. And so I don't know if exposed is the right word. That feels like a little bit of a slap in the face to say they got exposed.
Sure.
But I think that you have to learn from this if you're Georgia right now. I think that if you do match back up with Auburn and Auburn wins that Iron Bowl and you see them again, that I think you have to throw some extra wrinkles in your offensive game plan too. Maybe do some things that Jake Fromm's not used to. Maybe run a little more wildcat, throw a little extra couple wrinkles. Don't allow Auburn to do the same things again. I think that Auburn just was a little bit better on that stage.
Here's my take, and this is partially coming from a fan, partially coming from sort of an analyst type position. If you go back and rewind the tape of the offseason, we talked a lot about, that Georgia offensive line. I'm not so sure about that group.
Right.
That may only be an above average group. That may be about as good as it's going to be. And somewhere over the course of the season, that group started playing better and better and better, almost to the point where it became very easy to forget at the beginning of the year, we really wondered if the Georgia offensive line was going to be able to get it done. On Saturday, we were reminded for the first time probably since Notre Dame of why we had questions about Georgia's offensive line before the start of the year. And that's the one thing, I agree, exposed is too
harsh of a word.
There's a little too much connected to that word to use that to use
Auburn's
exposed.
too good of a team to say they were exposed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Auburn's too good of a team to say Georgia was exposed. It was just a good game.
But seeing the Georgia offensive line kind of go back and look a little bit like it did in 2016, that was the eye-opening aspect of this from a Georgia perspective.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think, listen, it's about being on schedule. Georgia's been able to play because, first of all, they're able to run the ball on everybody. That puts their defense in good positions. It puts Jake Fromm's in good position. I think what the more shocking part of the game was not Georgia's inability to really run the ball. To me, it was their front seven a lot of times not being able to kind of counteract what Kerryon Johnson's style was. The Le'Veon Bell style of waiting and see and allowing his blocks to develop and bouncing balls. That doesn't always work, but Kerryon Johnson has caught fire of late, and he has found a mesh point with this offensive line. And they bullied Georgia's front seven at times where that didn't seem to be a question mark going into the year. When you looked at Roquan Smith and all these guys, the linebacker core and Trenton Thompson and Lorenzo Carter and all these guys up front, you didn't think that would be a weak spot. I thought that was the crazier part of the game was seeing Auburn's offensive front. An offensive line that was a question mark as well, being able to shove them around at times in the front seven.
All right, item number 9, let's go back to Auburn here quickly for a moment. So everything the Georgia running game was not, the Auburn rushing game was. And after the game, Auburn coach Gus Malzahn says because of how well Kerryon Johnson played in this game and how well he's played all season long, he thinks that Johnson ought to be getting some major awards attention. Here's what Gus Malzahn said.
Kerryon Johnson, I've been saying it for a couple weeks. He's one of the best running backs in the country, if not the best. He proved it tonight. He needs to be in the Heisman talk, and very proud of him, not just rushing, but he had a big reception too, and he does a lot of different things in protection.
So listen, I'll be the first to tell you, Scott Franklin in the comment section always calls me a clown. Listen, this is one element where I feel like I kind of was a clown. Kerryon Johnson's better than I thought he was. I mean, it's one of those moments like during the game, in addition to being disappointed that my team was going to lose, watching it from sort of an evaluative standpoint, I was like, wow, I didn't realize Kerryon Johnson was quite this good, because I thought of him as more of a, for those of you that play fantasy football, I sort of thought of him as like a fantasy running back of like Auburn moves the ball down the field and Kerryon Johnson gets a touchdown.
Yeah, finishes it off.
But the truth is, the Adams kid for Notre Dame's having a great season. He did nothing against Georgia's rushing attack or defensive line early in the year. Kerryon Johnson was getting anything that he wanted on Saturday. He's just a better, more patient, and then when he hits a hole, he bursts in that hole. He's just a better running back than I realized. You know what? Maybe he should be a Heisman finalist. Well, not win the award. Maybe he should go to New York, though.
Well, listen, what's crazy about it is I think you fall in line with what the national media feels in the Heisman voting. I think they look at this game this weekend, and by the way, I think the reason he hasn't been on the scene more this year is because he did miss a couple of games. Didn't play against Clemson. He's been injured, nicked up a little bit this year. And he's been sharing carries with Cam Pedway. So for the last couple of weeks, all of a sudden he gets 60 carries. I think he's been over 310 yards when you combine the last 2 weeks against pretty good defenses. And listen, I think it was kind of a coming out party. I think that a lot of the people, the media around the country are like you, that were like, you know what, I know this guy has good numbers and good touchdown numbers, but now he's over the 1,000-yard mark, and now he's the feature running back for an Auburn team that is all of a sudden in the national title picture. So in one weekend, all of a sudden this guy looks 10 times better. But I'm with Gus Malzahn. He deserves a ton of credit for what he's been able to do. He's one of those guys that's shifty and not, he's just elusive for some reason, and then he's able to accelerate. Man, I thought it was a great show from him.
Scott Franklin says that Kerryon should be getting some Heisman love. So should Jalen Hurd as well, and that he gives a WDE at the end. So that's an Auburn fan showing a little love here to Hurts. I will say that the SEC at the top has been good enough. There ought to be somebody in New York in the SEC. Whether it's Hurts, whether it's Kerryon Johnson, probably not a candidate from Georgia right now. Nick Chubb just hasn't had enough, sort of Heisman-type moments. But somebody from the SEC needs to be in New York, even if it's not with much of a chance to win the award.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I kind of wish I could say that was maybe Damian Harris because I think he's a great running back for Alabama.
It's a good name, too.
He just hasn't been given the carries. I mean, he gets 8 or 9 carries and gets 90 yards this past weekend, but they're not handing him the ball enough. I think he faces a lot of the same situations that Kerryon Johnson was going to face when Cam Petway was healthy. It's not the feature guy. I think you need a feature guy. I think that's what Kerryon Johnson is now.
All right, y'all stick with us because we have a very special champion of life to close out our show here in just a moment. Before that, though, let me remind you that AT&T is brought to you by, or I should say, let me try that one more time. SEC Country Live brought to you by AT&T. They are a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless Direct TV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. Before we get to our champion of life, let me hit item number 10, though, on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So a little bit of a Twitter beef, war of words between two unlikely sources. First of all, Kirk Herbstreit is becoming the most humorless, joyless person on the internet. He's got the greatest job in the world. He travels around and sees all the great college football games, but you say one thing to this guy and he goes ballistic on you. We got this at SECCountry.com. Larry McReynolds, who's a NSCAR driver. He's a NASCAR analyst, former crew chief. Yeah, I just spoke. Sorry, Mr. NASCAR. I just spoke.
It's a tough topic because here it is. Kirk Herbstreit's like, who are you? You know what I mean? So I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, and I know Larry McReynolds. I think he does a good job on those old Fox broadcasts. I guess he's not on there anymore, but I used to think he was really fun on TV. But Larry McReynolds tweets out, let's see if the CFB committee can get it right this week. Kirk Herbstreit jumps Oklahoma all the way to number 1 in his mind. He's so anti-Crimson Tide and so sick of Baker Mayfield talk. Here's Kirk Herbstreit who comes back at him. Furthest thing from the truth, called objectivity. Isn't there a NASCAR race or a wrestling match you should be watching? He leaves the G off intentionally. Leave CFB analysis to the big boys. Hashtag beat it. I sort of think I'm done with Kirk Herbstreit after this.
Man.
That's a jerk thing to tweet right there.
Yeah. No, I had a hard time with it too. Listen, I've met Kirk Herbstreit a couple of times. I've been in these pregame meetings with him. I've talked to the guy in a social setting. I mean, I've hung out with him. He's a great guy. And I was kind of dumbfounded when I saw the tweet. I responded to it and I was like, man, I'm a huge fan of both of these guys, but I'm not a fan of what I'm seeing right now on Twitter.
Yeah.
And first of all, don't ever include yourself in a statement that calls people big boys. Don't ever include yourself in something where you're like, yeah, I'm one of the big boys. It's just not a good look.
Yeah, you want to be a self-proclaimed big boy.
Yeah, I love Kirk Herbstreit, but man, what a bad look. And then to listen, Larry McReynolds is probably, he could possibly be a NASCAR Hall of Famer. When you look at, he's won Daytona 500s as crew chief.
He's just a good dude.
He was Dale Earnhardt's crew chief, and so
bad job.
I think that Kirk Herbstreit picked a fight with kind of the wrong guy, and then you include the wrestling thing and about the NASCAR. It seems like
who do you think watches College Game Day every week? It's wrestling fans.
Exactly.
It's those kind of people.
And
Herbstreit comes across like a real jerk.
He ended up deleting the tweet, I think. It just, like I said, I'm a huge fan of Kirk Herbstreit. I think he's a great guy. It was just a bad look and kind of a bad moment on Twitter for him.
All right, real quick before we do our champion of life, we told you AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. Let's do our AT&T look ahead. Get you ready for next Saturday. We're already thinking about it a little bit. Listen, if you're a Georgia fan, next Saturday can't get here soon enough. Here's the slate of SEC games for next week. Most of these the sort of 1AA flavor. Alabama, Mercer, Auburn, UL Monroe. Mississippi State, Arkansas, not a terrible game. Georgia, Kentucky, that's a game for Georgia to play its final home game. UAB, Florida, be careful with the Blazers here. Or Florida just about a 7-point favorite there over UAB. Wofford, South Carolina. LSU, Tennessee, kind of interesting as interim coach Brady Hoke tries to lead him in there. A&M, Ole Miss, Missouri, Vanderbilt.
Can we go to a 9-game conference slate?
Yeah, it's just a bad job.
I'm going to try not to fall asleep in the middle of the day. There's no really marquee matches. I think that LSU, going into the year, LSU Tennessee looked like it could be a great game. When you talk about cross-division opponents, LSU going to Neyland Stadium, I thought that you could be really excited about that. None of these games, it's like none of these games are appointment television, though. I'm not going to get up. I'm not going to go out of my way to see any of them.
By the way, totally agree with Steve Weaver, Michael Gillespie, all the people who kind of getting on Kirk Herbstreit for making fun of wrestling fans. Listen, I'm right there with you on all of that. All right, so here on AT&T SEC Country Live, we always close out our show the same way each and every day, and a lot of you ask, well, how are you going to do this if Butch Jones is not the coach at Tennessee anymore? Can you still have a champion of life without Butch Jones coaching at Tennessee? Butch Jones may be gone, but the champion of life will live forever, both on this show and in our hearts and minds. And as a way of kind of paying tribute to the man who started it all, here's a little farewell to now former Tennessee coach Butch Jones, heading off to the big championship of life in the sky, at least from a football standpoint. Bye-bye, Butch.
Bye, Butch.
They're a champion. they've won the biggest championship, and that's a championship of life.
How do I say goodbye?
Championship of life. The biggest championship. Championship of life.
I thought we get
championship of life.
On AT&T SEC Country Live, but we certainly appreciate your contribution to the show, and have no fear. The champion of life is not going away, even though Butch Jones is going away.
Well, listen, you know what's funny about it? I'm not even sure that guy has a 5-star heart. He's been talking about his players, and then he yanks them out of the program and makes Tennessee look bad. Man, we enjoyed it, Butch.
Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Give us a rating and review. You can hear the audio version of the show. You can also share the show with your friends on Facebook. That'd be a huge help to us. We're not like Kirk Herbstreit. We're not going to block you on Twitter. Even those of you who are saying all this bad stuff about me, by the way, I won't block you. You can say whatever you want. Just come back and watch us again at 3 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, right here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Y'all have a great day.